Hello guys, welcome back to Anime Moments. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Against the Gods based on novel. So let's start explanation. Yoon-chae himself had entered an exceptionally subtle state. Suddenly, he couldn't feel pain, nor could he hear any sounds. It was as though everything in the surroundings had all disappeared in an instant. He felt as though his body was currently floating lightly and swimming freely in the boundless sky. Between heaven and earth, and within the chaotic space, it was as though his existence was the only one which remained. Endlessly majestic and incomparably calm forces of nature poured towards him. The forces enveloped his entire body and gushed into his body, healing his injuries, restoring his profound energy, and refining his body. These forces of energy felt familiar, yet foreign to him, and they much purer than before. No. It should be said that though they were the same forces of energy, it was as if they were forces of energy of another stage. His consciousness was telling him that his great way of the Buddha had once again made a breakthrough. And the breakthrough this time was completely different from the few breakthroughs in the past. The first few breakthroughs could be said to be breakthroughs of levels within the same stage. While the breakthrough this time, that bizarre sensation, was totally a breakthrough of a large realm from a stage to a much higher stage. Back then, when he made a breakthrough into the third level of the Great Way of the Buddha, Jasmine had once told him that every 3 levels of the Great Way of the Buddha was a watershed. The first 3 could be considered as the entry stage realm. After entering the 4th, it would mean stepping into the middle stage realm. And to step into the 4th level with the body of a mortal was even harder than ascending to the heavens itself. Yet, currently, with the time span of 3 years from his previous breakthrough, he had already successfully stepped into the 4th level of the Great Way of the Buddha, which Jasmine had termed as a task even harder than ascending to the heavens itself. The cultivation of the Great Way of the Buddha was not reliant on battles, nor was it reliant on the existence of profound energy. Its growth was mainly reliant on comprehension and insights. In these 18 months, Yoon-chae's Great Way of the Buddha had basically been circulating at every second, and more than 80% of the time, it was in the circulation state at its largest degree and highest limit. The large amount of forces of heaven and earth absorbed could hardly be calculated. Subtly, his communication with the forces of nature and his comprehension to the Great Way of the Buddha had been constantly deepening. He had finally broken through the bottleneck of the 4th level, and stepped into another brand new realm of the Great Way of the Buddha. His body was also being reborn from the baptism bestowed by the Great Way of the Buddha of a higher level. And it was a rebirth of an extreme degree. Following after Yoon-chae's breakthrough of the Great Way of the Buddha, the recovery speed of his wounds instantly accelerated as well. The wounds on his body were closing at a speed viewable with the naked eyes. Through Yoon-chae's closing wounds, Jasmine could see that his blood was clearly mixed with a thin gold color. The 4th level of the Great Way of the Buddha. The first step towards the legendary body of the saints. He had actually used less than 5 years, at a speed even faster than Big Brother. Jasmine lightly muttered. Currently, she was actually a little out of sorts. Even with her knowledge and experience, she was still deeply astonished by Yoon-chae's breakthrough this time. For the first 3 breakthroughs, although Yoon-chae had always made them ahead of her predictions, they had merely startled her a little. While this time, her feelings really had to be described with the word shock. Because the breakthrough into the 4th stage of the Great Way of the Buddha was a completely different concept from the first 3. Although his breakthrough was greatly related to the 18 months of hell-like cultivation in the dimensional turbulence, Jasmine clearly knew that was not the entire reason. The most important reasons were comprehensive ability and luck, in other words, the affinity and favor the natural chaotic space had towards him. Otherwise, when swapped with a person who had the same body, same strength, but different comprehensive ability and comparatively normal luck in the same spatial turbulence, forget about 18 months, even if he was given 18 years, or even 180 years, or even 1,800 years, it would be extremely difficult for him to break through into the 4th level of the Great Way of the Buddha. The truth in front of her eyes had told Jasmine that Yoon-chae's comprehensive ability and his luck had actually far surpassed her brother's. In 4 hours, Yoon-chae's body was completely refined. The Buddha pagoda above his head disappeared, and all the external and internal injuries on his body were completely healed as well. He opened his eyes, and during the instant his pupils glowed, a hint of golden radiance flashed past. Very good. Jasmine, on this extremely rare occasion, nodded with praise. I did not expect that you would actually break through into the fourth level of the Great Way of the Buddha so quickly. You're already capable of absorbing the forces of nature of an even higher level. The refinement from the fourth level of the Great Way of the Buddha grants you an arm strength of 50,000 kilograms. The current strength and recovery speed of your body is not the slightest bit inferior to the bestowal of the Dragon God's bloodline either. With the integration of the Dragon God's bloodline, although you still lack a lot in terms of power, the strength of your body is not at all inferior to a half-step monarch. Based on recovery speed, you have even surpassed an actual monarch. Currently, you should be able to wield purgatory relatively easily. However, even though your growth is astonishing, you shouldn't rashly activate the rumbling heaven gate. The first level of the Great Way of the Buddha bestowed an arm strength of 2,000 kilograms, the second level of the Great Way of the Buddha bestowed an arm strength of 4,000 kilograms, the third level of the Great Way of the Buddha bestowed an arm strength of 10,000 kilograms, but there was a huge leap in magnitude in what the fourth level bestowed, an arm strength of 50,000 kilograms. Although the increase in body strength could not be felt intuitively, it was naturally still to an astonishing extent that was similar to the increase in arm strength. With his current body, recovery ability, and level of the Great Way of the Buddha, normal spatial turbulences were basically no longer able to cause him actual harm. He could live without feeling a hint of pressure, and even if he were to sleep openly, it would be no problem at all. Yunche felt that his own body was incomparably light. His vision and hearing ability had become more sensitive as well. Slightly stirring his thoughts, his body began to float up. After his profound strength had broken through into the sky profound realm, he finally possessed the ability to fly as well. Within the time span of 18 months, his profound strength had consecutively crossed 8 levels. Currently, he was already at the 8th level of the sky profound realm. In a year and a half, from the peak of the earth profound, he crossed into the late-stage sky profound. Yunche summoned Dragon Fault, and grabbed it in his hands. As a heavy sword with a mass of 10,000 kilograms, he would still feel a great sense of heaviness even while wielding it with both hands. But currently, when grabbing it with a single hand, it felt so light, it was as though it did not exist. He had not endured this 18 months of hell-like experience for nothing. He could clearly feel that his current strength was many times stronger than before he entered the primordial profound arc. In a short 18 months, with such growth, it was enough to cause anyone's expression to pale from shock. However, Yunche was neither too shocked nor overjoyed, because only he himself, out of this entire world, knew what he had experienced in these 18 months. Has the primordial profound arc halted? Yunche looked at the surroundings, and asked Jasmine. It should have halted, though, I don't know what kind of place it has stopped at. Jasmine answered. But this isn't the problem you should be worried about right now. What you need to think about now is how to leave this place. You have two choices. If you know the art of formation construction, you can try fixing the profound formation on the stone door. If you don't have this ability, then you're only left with this one choice, and that's to forcefully break the stone door or the walls. In regards to whether Yunche knew how to construct profound formations, Jasmine naturally knew that very well. Hence, if Yunche wanted to leave this place, the only method was to break the stone door. However, every stone and brick in this place came from the primordial era. Their degree of toughness could only be said to have surpassed the understanding of a normal person. Yunche had merely experienced 18 months of spatial turbulences, and his body was already injured countless of times. If not for the existence of the Dragon God's physique and the Great Way of the Buddha, he would have already died countless of times. While the bricks here had actually experienced for God knows how many years of spatial turbulences. However, no matter where his line of sight landed on, he couldn't find the existence of even a hint of crack or damage. Although Yunche's strength had greatly surged, to have him break open a stone door that countless years of spatial turbulences could not leave a scratch on, no matter how he looked at it, it wasn't exactly realistic. However, if he wanted to leave this place, this was his only way out. He had to try it, and perhaps, a miracle would actually appear. Yunche grabbed Dragon Fault, sensed the strength on his body which was formidable to the extent where it was hard for him to believe it himself, and said, "In this period of time, my strength and profound strength had greatly rose several times. I might really hold the possibility of damaging this stone door. Even if I'm only able to create a small dent to it with a single try, if I were to continue endlessly, there will definitely come a day it breaks completely. Try it then," Jasmine said calmly, as she patiently looked at him. In regards to the degree of toughness of the stone door, naturally, she was able to understand it more than Yunche. Even Yunche's current level of strength was something she was more clear of than Yunche himself. Yunche took a step forward and stood before the door. Breathing in lightly, he activated Burning Heart and raised Dragon Fault with both of his hands. Then, his brows knitted, profound energy gathered, and he smashed a falling moon sinking star over. Clang! An incomparably ear-piercing smashing sound rang. Yunche's ears felt as though they were pierced by metal needles. He temporarily lost his sense of hearing under the intense pain, as an incredibly large rebound that had far surpassed his expectations assaulted him. Yunche's arms instantly numbed, and Dragon Fault flew out of his hands as well. It then smashed onto the wall with a clang and fell onto the ground. Yunche was sent directly flying as well, as his back heavily smashed against the wall at the back, stunning him completely from the collision. From this incredibly large rebound, Yunche could make a rough estimate on how enormous his current strength had grown from before. And from a rebound like this, other than a slight and temporary mess to his brain and blood flow, he didn't receive the slightest bit of actual damage. He hurriedly stepped forward, and his eyes landed on the position the stone door was struck with Dragon Fault. And that position was no longer as smooth as a mirror. Instead, an extremely small, white dot had appeared. Although this white dot was so small, it could be ignored if one did not pay attention. A white dot had indeed appeared. As time flowed, there wasn't any trace of the white dot being restored to its former state. Joy instantly surged inside Yunche's heart. Although it was merely an extremely small white dot, it had already clearly meant that this stone door was not impregnable, and the current him already possessed the strength capable of damaging it, even if it was merely a small scar. Not to mention that he didn't even use his full strength earlier. Oh! Jasmine's line of sight fell on that white dot as well. Other than a light response, she did not express any other emotions. I might really be able to slowly break open this door, Yunche said excitedly. The spatial turbulences had stopped, his strength had risen explosively, and currently, he was able to see the hope of escaping this place. It was impossible for Yunche to not feel excited. Reaching out his palm, Dragon Fault had already flew back into his hands. Tightly grabbing onto Dragon Fault, his eyes flashed with a radiance filled with confidence. Purgatory. A shallow profound light shone from Yunche's body, and his aura instantly turned violent. Within his eyes, a scarlet red, similar to the color of fresh blood, lit up. Phoenix flames surged at this moment as well, as they hurriedly enveloped the entire blade of Dragon Fault. With the purgatory state activated, although his body still felt a little heavy, compared to the feeling from before, of a mountain pressing on his body and his organs seemingly about to shatter, it was completely different. He believed that if his profound strength were to make a breakthrough into the Emperor Profound Realm, he might even be able to casually, and without pressure, continue maintaining it like Evil Soul and Burning Heart. This time, I'm definitely able to break open a small crack, Yunche confidently growled. With every small crack, there will come a day when I will be able to smash open a huge crack large enough for me to get out. As his words fell, Yunche's aura had already expanded to the extreme. With a loud roar, Dragon Fault, which was filled with phoenix flames, was smashed downwards with all his might, destroying sky, decimating earth. Boom! The space surrounding the stone door completely sank, as though the entire world had shaken for a moment. Yunche had already done the preparation needed to endure the enormous rebound. During that one moment when Dragon Fault and the stone door collided, his hands began to numb at the same time. Suddenly, he felt that his hands had oddly lightened. Clang! Violent forces of energy were sent towards Yunche, ruthlessly smashing onto him, causing him to puke out a mouthful of fresh blood. His back once again smashed heavily onto the wall behind, and the crash was much heavier than before. Dragonfolt had once again escaped his hands as well. However, this time, Dragonfolt had split into two, which flew into two different directions. Within the distorted space, the sound of a long and painful dragon cry stirred. Actually, in the original settings, Dragonfolt should have been broken by Yu Xinghan when he used the Sun-Moon Calamity. But during the chapter, when Yu Xinghan forced the two of them in desperate straits, I had actually forgotten to this matter. So, it can only be broken here now. Dragonfolt broke into two pieces, landing heavily to the left and right of Yunche, and no longer showed any signs of movement. The tip of the sword that was shaped like the head of a ferocious dragon, slowly lost its energy. Light faded completely from the dragon's eyes as it became a dull grey color. Yunche laid on the ground, blankly staring at the scene in front of him, and did not come back to his senses for a good while. After that, he stretched out his arm, making the gesture to summon Dragonfolt. However, Dragonfolt was destroyed, and the still immature spiritual consciousness within the sword along with it. The sword showed no response to his summons. Yunche stood up, picked up the two pieces of Dragonfolt wordlessly, and then slumped in a corner, mutely staring at the destroyed sword in a daze. For years ago, he had received Dragonfolt from the trial grounds of the Dragon God. Afterwards, it received a power-up from the lingering spirit of the Azure primordial dragon, becoming an Emperor profound weapon. All this time, it had accompanied Yunche, braved innumerable obstacles with him, and fought with him shoulder to shoulder. Dragonfolt had become akin to another limb for Yunche, and had also become his most reliable companion, their prestige growing with each accomplishment they achieved together. But today, it laid broken, and at his own hands no less, snapping due to his own strength. Your strength is now already in a different realm as compared to what it was previously. It was, after all, only an Emperor profound weapon. Your present state of strength is already more than what it could bear. This stone door has unparalleled hardness and practically reflected the full strength of your blowback. That Dragonfolt would break from that is completely reasonable. Jasmine said in a flat voice. Once Yunche had entered the state of purgatory, she could basically predict this outcome. Yunche let out a long sigh. He picked up Dragonfolt with care, his hand slowly caressing the ice-cold body of the sword, and softly said, "My old friend, we have already fought together for so many years, little did I expect that you would end up being destroyed by my own hands. Maybe it's better this way, it was about time for you to take a rest anyways. Once I leave this place, I will think of a way to restore you." After he finished talking, Yunche kept Dragonfolt, and his heart soon recovered its equilibrium. His eyes fell upon the portion of the door which Dragonfolt had smashed. There was no longer a white dot, but rather, in its place, appeared a small crack. Yunche's spirit was shaken, and he swiftly moved closer to the door. His eyes did not deceive him. A small crack had appeared on the flat surface of the stone door. This gap was only as wide as the fingernail of his pinky, and the depth of the crack was equivalent to the thickness of one sheet of paper. However, it could at least be counted as a crack. But this did not make Yunche happy in the least, because this small crack had been bought at a costly price, the destruction of Dragonfolt. Without Dragonfolt and him using his bare hands, it would be impossible to recreate such a flaw. "Please, find her." This caused Yunche, who was lost in thought as he stared at the crack, to violently snap his head up and look forward. "What happened?" Jasmine asked. "I heard that voice again, the same voice I heard the day we first entered the primordial profound arc," Yunche said while standing up. Once the dimensional turbulence began its assault, all of his energy was spent resisting it. He heard only the sounds of explosions and the tearing of space, and nothing else. Even if the voice tried speaking to him during that period, it would definitely have been engulfed by the sounds being made by the dimensional turbulence. Now that the dimensional turbulence had subsided, that strange, ethereal voice, whose location could not be pinpointed, sounded once again. "What exactly did you hear?" Jasmine asked as she furrowed her eyebrows. Yunche thought for a while and then said, "The voice before only came intermittently, with long pauses in between. It seemed to be asking me to find someone, and then save him. It also mentioned the sky poison pearl." The The same voice that spoke to me again just now, asking, please find him, still requested that I find someone. That voice mentioned the sky poison pearl. Jasmine's eyes flashed, and after she pondered a while, continued, ignore the voice for now. You are currently trapped in here and can't even save yourself, much less going to save someone else. You should figure out a way to leave this place first. Yunche nodded his head and sat down cross-legged on the floor. After racking his brains for a long time, he retrieved the flame dragon heart that he was always reluctant to consume from the sky poison pearl. After using phoenix flames to cook it, he began wolfing it down. After more than a year of not eating anything, even though his body was not very affected by it, his stomach had long ago entered a state of extreme hunger. He had never gone without food this long before, even counting both his lives. Yunche quickly filled his stomach and followed his meal with a huge bowl of dragon's blood. He rubbed his stomach and sighed in satisfaction, after which he asked, Jasmine, how long have I been in here? 18 months. 18 months, to think that so much time has passed. Yunche's face was filled with bewilderment and he hurriedly turned his head towards Jasmine. If I have been in here this long, then the seal that you had placed upon yourself should already be released, right? Jasmine eyed him coolly, and said in a cold voice, why? Do you want to borrow my power to leave this place? If you have recovered your strength, then that would of course be the best method. Yunche said, his face was filled with hope as he continued, it has already been more than 3 years since you sealed your strength. According to what you said initially, regarding the time frame of this seal, your powers should have already recovered by now. If you want to rely on my strength to leave this place, you should give up on that train of thought. Jasmine turned her face away and huffily said, when my strength has recovered, I will naturally inform you. So that means your strength still has not recovered yet? Despair and disappointment flashed on Yunche's face, but these feelings quickly subsided. He looked at Jasmine and suddenly laughed. He walked towards her and stood in front of her, and lightly hugged her as she looked on in surprise. It was completely out of Jasmine's expectations that he would suddenly perform such an action, and she subconsciously struggled against it, but how could her powerless body struggle free from Yunche's embrace? She shouted with fury and a hint of confusion, you! What do you think you are doing? Of course I am hugging you. Yunche said with a grin. After I sent Shuai away, I thought that I was definitely going to die. Who would have thought that unexpectedly I managed to survive yet again? This feeling of not losing my life, not losing hope, and of course, not losing you is really great, so I suddenly had an urge to embrace you. I am your master. Did I allow you to hug me? Jasmine said in a furious voice as she struggled weakly. Yunche said innocently, but what's wrong with a hug? Back then, I even kissed you, and you weren't as angry with me as you are now. The kiss he was referring to had occurred when they met the flame dragon, and Jasmine had used all her power to eliminate it, aggravating the poison in her body and nearly caused her soul to fade out of existence. In order to save her, Yunche had fed her a large amount of his blood mouth to mouth. Of course, Jasmine would definitely not forget what had happened. When Yunche mentioned it, her body stiffened, and her shyness turned into rage. Her rage and killing intent suddenly exploded. She stopped struggling, and instead said in an extremely cold voice, let go. However, even though she spared no effort to project a frightening aura, in the end, she bore no true killing intent towards Yunche, and even her fury arose from shame, so this didn't even arouse any feelings of deterrence within Yunche. The corner of Yunche's mouth moved and he uttered a dispirited, fine, softly as he relaxed his hold around Jasmine. Jasmine retreated swiftly, stared at Yunche with a face filled with anger, and said, if you dare touch me without permission again, don't think I won't dare to cripple your hand once I have fully recovered. Yunche pressed down on the tip of his nose and slowly nodded, oh, thank you for reminding me. Once you have recovered your powers, I won't be able to hug you anymore, so, shouldn't I hug you more now while I still have the chance? Having said that, Yunche narrowed his eyes and advanced towards Jasmine, assuming a posture that indicated he would hug her once again. You? Jasmine ground her white teeth, clenched her small hands tightly, and with a cry, turned into a ray of red light which disappeared from Yunche's eyes, immediately returning to the sky poison pearl. You are the kind of person who always goes around tricking and bullying girls, That my big brother said was most hateful, a lecher. Now you dare to extend your devilish hands towards the body of this princess. If not for, I would definitely kill you. HMPH. After Jasmine finished her rant, she fell silent, and no matter what Yunche did, she simply ignored him. Yunche sat in front of the stone door, his eyes staring at the tiny crack. Closing his eyes, he concentrated all his energy into thinking of a way to escape. After not moving for a few hours, he suddenly opened his eyes, and they shone with a strange light. He raised up both his arms and rested his palms on his thighs, facing them upwards. Following this, in the same moment, his right hand began to smolder with phoenix flames, while in his left hand there grew a small delicate tree of frozen end. Yunche closed his eyes once more, his chest violently rising and falling. This was followed by slow and steady breathing. The atmosphere grew much heavier than normal. In this thick silence, the heat from the phoenix flames and cold energy from the tree of frozen end started to pulse chaotically. The hot and cold energies offset each other at first, and this was also in accordance to one of the most basic natural laws of the world. But as time passed, the two conflicting energies which were supposed to offset each other began to separate and isolate themselves. 2 hours later, the tiny space had gradually been divided into two different realms. One half was as hot as lava, the other as cold as abyssal ice. Two realms which should offset one another, somehow managed to coexist together in a completely open space without interfering with each other in the slightest. At this time, Yunche finally began to move. Slowly, he began to bring his right hand, burning with phoenix flame, and his left hand, maintaining the frozen end energy, together. This was done in an extremely careful manner, and from his expression, it seemed that every little movement Yunche made required him to consume a large amount of mental energy and physical strength. A foot of distance required a full 30 breaths before his left and right hands could finally touch one another. At the moment the phoenix flame and frozen end touched, there was no melting of the frozen end or the suppression of the phoenix flame. Instead, the crimson phoenix flames and the crystal blue frozen end began to blend together, frozen end being immersed in the phoenix flames and vice versa. After a while, both the phoenix flames and the frozen end energy had completely coalesced together and formed a cluster of bizarre flames which gently swayed in the air, giving off an icy blue light. At the same time, the space which was divided into two different realms had combined together as well. Moreover, this combination did not mean that the hot and cold energies had suppressed each other. Instead, it was the feeling of bone-chilling cold and bitter heat existing simultaneously, chaotically interweaving and interlacing together. I succeeded. Yunche opened his eyes and looked at the ice flame which danced upon his palm. Initially, when he was in frozen cloud Asgard, his first attempt at successfully forming this heaven-defying ice flame took him an entire 2 days' worth of time. However, after the explosive growth of his abilities and mental strength, coupled with his newfound enlightenment regarding the energy of heaven and earth, he only needed a short 2 hours to succeed on his second try. Moreover, his power-up also caused the might of the phoenix flames and the frozen end divine arts to increase dramatically. This current ice flame, compared to the one formed in frozen cloud Asgard, was mightier by far. Yunche's hands, which were controlling the ice flames, began to shake, and it seemed that he might lose control of this cluster of ice flames. This kind of heaven-defying, unnatural combination manifested as an energy which defied both the laws of nature. Even though what he produced was just a tiny cluster of flames, 70% of Yunche's profound energy and 50% of his mental strength had been consumed. "Be sure to not let me down," Yunche muttered as his eyes flared, and he pushed his palms forward, striking the stone door with his cluster of ice flames. An issue note: in the Chinese language, the it, she, he pronouns all sound the same. The voice is saying her, but Yunche thought that he had to find a him. This is not incorrect, thanks. The ice flames left Yunche's palm and latched onto the surface of the stone door. There was no roar of power, nor was there any eruption of phoenix flames or frozen end energy. In fact, there was not even the slightest bit of sound or light that normally came with the release of power. The ice flames simply slowly extinguished themselves and disappeared, without making a single sound. However, fist-sized depressions had appeared on the parts of the stone door where the ice flames had landed. These depressions curved inwardly to form perfectly shaped hemispheres. The surface of these depressions were extremely smooth, comparable to a perfectly crafted mirror. It was as if this surface had been polished using the world's most exquisite craftsmanship. After observing these depressions closely, Yunche's face was filled with joy and surprise. Before, when he had activated Purgatory and used his strongest attack, even after breaking Dragon Fault in the process, he had only been able to cause a crack the size of his pinky nail. It had barely given him the slimmest glimmer of hope that he could one day escape from this place. However, because of the miracle caused by the ice flames, he could clearly envision the day he would walk out of this place. Very good, Yunche said excitedly as he clenched both his fists. If this is the case, I might only need to repeat this process several hundred times until I can create a big enough gap for me to escape. Once again, Yunche spread out both his eyes, ignited his phoenix flames, and concentrated his frozen end. But this time, before he could even begin to combine the two, his mind swam, and a deep sense of fatigue seemed to have come forth from his profound veins. The reaction of both his mind and profound strength caused him to hesitate for a moment. He released both the phoenix flames and the frozen end energy and began to meditate, focusing fully on recovering both his profound energy and mental strength. After a while, Yunche's profound energy and mental strength had recovered to around their peak condition, and he once again began to fuse together the ice flames. This time, the fusion took slightly less time than it had before. Once again, he smashed the ice flames against the stone door in the exact same spots which he attacked before. After the ice flame had once again done its silent and deadly work, the width and the depth of those fist-sized depressions had noticeably increased, but the surface was still as smooth as a mirror, with no hint of roughness. Yunche's only goal right now was to escape this place where he had been trapped for the last 18 months. So the rest of his time was spent on two activities. The first was the fusion of ice flame, the second was the recovery of his profound energy and mental strength. Every day was spent repeating this process over and over again. Unknowingly, the time he took to fuse the ice flames became faster and faster. Initially, he could only fuse it twice a day. However, this rose to thrice a day, then 4 times a day. After 5 months had passed, when Yunche was in peak condition, he could even forcibly fuse the ice flames up to 5 times a day. Compared to how it was initially, the time required to fuse the ice flames and the profound and mental energy it consumed had all been reduced by several times. Moreover, after undergoing this process, both his profound and mental strength had been greatly tempered. Profound Sky Continent, Blue Wind Nation. Presently, 2 years had already passed since the news of Yunche's death in the Primordial Profound Arc. While Yunche was undergoing a life-and-death struggle in the Primordial Profound Arc, Blue Wind Nation had long ago descended into chaos and become a land beset by war. Blue Wind Nation's capital, Blue Wind Imperial City. Your Majesty, it is a disaster. New Moon City has been completely occupied and both Governor Murong and General Zhenhuai have fallen in battle. Some disciples from the New Moon Profound Palace tried to organize further resistance. But they have all been killed in battle as well. Presently, New Moon City, Blue Fire Region, Solid Earth Territory have all been lost to us. The bearing of bad tidings caused the expressions of everyone present to change agitatedly. Blue Wind Palace Chief Dongfeng Xiu said in a shocked voice, "How can it be this fast? Didn't New Moon City have 400,000 troops garrisoned there?" Reporting to Palace Chief Dongfang, yesterday the Divine Phoenix Empire's siege unit was bolstered by the sudden addition of 4 experts from the Divine Phoenix sect. They were reportedly all Tyrant Profound level experts. Over half of our 400,000 troops were killed under the might of their Phoenix flames. Half of New Moon City has also been burned into cinders. The heavily wounded soldier shouted as he began to sob loudly. 4 overlords. All of those present were amongst the highest echelons of power within Blue Wind Nation, but once they heard such news, sweat broke out all over their bodies as their faces blanched and their hearts began to birth a feeling of utter despair. All of their gazes began to concentrate on Kang Yu. Kang Yu was dressed in a set of gold clothing, wearing a purple gold crown on her head. She stood on the tower of the city gate, gazing towards the south. It seemed as if she could see the faraway flames of battle. Her expression still retained its majesty, and her beautiful eyes were filled with calm, as if the loss of New Moon City had not affected her in the least. She was no longer that gentle and delicate Princess King Yu, whose whole existence revolved around Yunche. She was now the Empress of Blue Wind Nation, held the ultimate authority within her country, and was responsible for leading her people in these dark and troubled times. She turned around, as her phoenix-like eyes surveyed the people around her, and spoke in a voice as calm as water, "Everyone, now that new moon has been lost, does anyone have anything to say?" All the officials gathered looked at each other, but no one stood forth to speak. Divine Phoenix Empire was just too strong. Compared to Blue Wind Nation, the disparity between the power of both of these nations could be said to be akin to heaven and earth. Engaging in war with the Divine Phoenix Empire could not be termed as a battle, it was instead a one-sided massacre and suppression. The Divine Phoenix Empire invasion had not even lasted for 2 years, yet Blue Wind Nation had lost more than half of its territories, and even more importantly, the 5 most important major cities had been lost as well. In fact, it was likely they would soon come knocking on the doors of the Blue Wind Imperial City itself. Without even considering the present Blue Wind Nation, even if it was a Blue Wind Nation which was stronger by 10 times, it still would not be enough to withstand this assault. In the face of absolute power, all schemes and fighting spirit were nothing but fleeting shadows. Under this death-like oppressive silence, one person couldn't tolerate it any longer and stood up, shouting, "Royal sister! This battle is unwinnable, and any further resistance, besides increasing the number of casualties, is utterly meaningless. Divine Phoenix Empire's army is already pressing upon on our gates, and will reach Blue Wind Imperial City in no time at all. To surrender now and end this war is the most correct decision." The one who spoke was precisely Second Prince King Yi. No, following King Yu's coronation as Empress, he had already been elevated to that of Grand Prince, no longer remaining a princeling. After those words left his mouth, the faces of several of the generals present darkened with fury. However, these generals were strictly in the minority. The eyes of the large majority present flickered, because what King Yi had said was what was buried in the heart for the longest time. It was just that they did not dare to voice it out. "How presumptuous of you!" King Yi shouted in rage, "Our nation is imperiled, New Moon City has fallen, but instead of thinking of your country and hating the Divine Phoenix Empire, you dare to say such shameful things in front of everyone. You have utterly disappointed this Empress." King Yi saw the reactions of the people surrounding him, clenched his teeth, and harshly cried, "Royal sister! In regards to the strength of Divine Phoenix Empire and the continued existence of our Blue Wind Nation, we are all well aware of the impending outcome. All of this so-called resistance is simply meaningless. If we surrender and take the initiative to welcome the Divine Phoenix Army, the war will end immediately. Our Blue Wind Nation will be absorbed under the banner of the Divine Phoenix Empire, and not only will we be allowed to live, we will even be granted significant status as nobles." Silence. Empress King Yu's beautiful brows arched and she yelled in fury, "King Yi! As a Grand Prince of the Imperial family, how can you utter such outrageous and shameless words? Have you forgotten the atrocities Divine Phoenix Empire has inflicted on our nation? Have you forgotten how many of our citizens died to defend our country? Have you forgotten how our royal father died? In the face of this national grievance and in front of the bones of countless heroes, you dare to show such cowardly behavior and would choose to be a defeated dog." King Yu's chest violently heaved, her extreme disappointment and anger clear for all to see. "Because this was your first offense, this Empress will, for the time being, forget what you have just said. However, if you dare say anything to besmirch the dignity of our imperial family again, this Empress will definitely not spare you." Being fiercely reprimanded by King Yu in front of all the high officials caused King Yi's face to darken. He once more clenched his teeth and shouted in a discontented voice, "Royal sister! I am not cowardly or afraid of death. It is for our Blue Wind Imperial family, for the lives of all of those present, and even for our entire Blue Wind Nation that I say these things. Divine Phoenix Empire is everywhere, all the large sects have surrendered, and even Xiao sect took the initiative to welcome them and express their loyalty. We can only continue on if we survive, and to be able to tolerate momentary shame is the hallmark of a real man. Moreover, Royal Sister, now that you are the Empress of Blue Wind, if you take the initiative to surrender, the Divine Phoenix Empire may even let you continue on as the Blue Wind Nation's ruler. If you do not do this, there is only a dead end awaiting you." The two fates are as different as heaven and earth. Royal sister, please come to your senses. Bastard. Empress Kangyu roared in a low voice, her majestic gaze turning cold enough to pierce bone. Men, drag Kangyi out below this tower and behead him for all to see. Once the words had come out of Kang Yu's mouth, all the people present were thrown into a state of shock. Immediately, more than 10 senior officials hurriedly stood up, but before they could utter a single word, they were cut off by Kang Yu's icy voice. Whoever dares to plead for his sake will be implicated as well. Two golden-cloaked imperial guards strode forth and firmly took hold of Kang Yi, preparing to drag him out. Kang Yi had never in his wildest dreams thought that Kang Yu would actually execute him. After all, he was Kang Yu's blood brother, a prince of the Blue Wind Nation. He cried out as he struggled, You dare to kill me? I am Grand Prince of Blue Wind Nation, your royal brother. All that I have said was for the sake of the survival of the royal bloodline. On what basis do you have to kill me? If you kill me, how can you face our dead royal father? If this empress does not kill you, then I really would not be able to face our royal father, and will let down all the ancestors of our Blue Wind Imperial family. The fact that our Blue Wind Imperial family has birthed such a wretched and cowardly degenerate who would rather be the slave of the enemy is our true shame. There is no need to drag him outside, behead him immediately. Royal sister. You. Wait, royal sister. Ah. Shunk. As the blade of the Imperial Guardsman rose and fell neatly, so too did Kang Yi's head fly from his neck in front of everyone present. Blood flew everywhere as his head landed on the ground and rolled a far distance, leaving a scarlet trail of blood gurgling in its wake. A heavy gurgling sound issued from the throats of all who were present, and those who originally stood forth to plead on behalf of Kang Yi retreated in profuse fear, both legs going soft immediately. After Kang Yu had ascended to the throne, the Blue Wind Profound Palace that was under the command of Dongfang Xiu became completely loyal to her. Controlling both the power of the Blue Wind Profound Palace and having the status of Empress was equivalent to having the greatest control over who lived or died. Even though Kang Yi was a Grand Prince, if she wanted to kill him, no one would dare to stop her or express discontent. Blue Wind can completely collapse, but it can never be allowed to yield and live out an ignoble existence. Blue Wind may be extinguished, this Empress may die, but as long as this Empress draws a single breath, I will fight Divine Phoenix Empire to the death. Now, who else among you wants to surrender? Empress Kang Yu's gaze swept across all who were present, her voice carrying a heavy threat and a faint killing intent. As her voice fell, over 100 senior officials in the venue fell to their knees hurriedly, and not a single sound could be heard after. No one dared to mention the word surrender anymore. Dongfang Xiu stood at the forefront and he silently watched Empress Kang Yu, his heart letting out a long sigh. He had stayed by Kang Wanhe's side for the longest time. It could be said that he had watched Kang Yu grow up. In the palace where a silent war was constantly being waged on all sides, her heart had remained as clear as still water, a soft and tender blossom. She loathed conflict and never used her status as a princess to ride roughshod over people of lower status. She was gentle and compassionate and forget about killing others. As she was growing up, she couldn't even bear to hurt someone. After she and Yunche got married, she cared even less about the affairs of the imperial family, and even forgot her status as a princess, as she committed her entire heart to Yunche. After Yunche left for Frozen Cloud Asgard, she spent her days gazing at the window wistfully, and did not hesitate to ask the palace maids for instruction, to learn the things a wife was supposed to know. All her thoughts were focused on becoming Yunche's most splendid and perfect taste. But the present Kang Yu had become a completely different person, killing decisively, towering above all others and at times even becoming cruel and merciless, cold and callous. Her previous softness and grace had completely disappeared. 2 years ago, once they received news that Yunche had died within the primordial profound arc, Kang Yu had fainted on the spot and fell deeply ill. 3 months later, Divine Phoenix Empire dispatched their 3 million-strong army to rush across their border, beginning a large-scale invasion. This threw Blue Wind into chaos as it faced a precarious situation. Another 3 months later, Kang Wanhe was assassinated, and even on his deathbed, he could not find someone to succeed the throne. The princes had spent their entire lives jostling for position, scheming to win the approval of Kang Wanhe, as they all dreamed of becoming emperor. But once Divine Phoenix Empire invaded, Blue Wind's only fate was to perish. Who would be willing to be the ruler of a dead nation? All of them would rather hide away. However, at that time, King Yu, who was still mired in the pain of Yunche's death, appeared at King Wanhe's bedside, and using her weak shoulders, willingly took on the burden of fighting against the doomed fate of her nation. In the history of the Blue Wind imperial family, there had never been a female ruler before. However, when King Yu ascended to the throne, there was not even a single objection from the princes. Instead, they all let out a long sigh of relief. Dongfang Xiu still remembered when King Wanhe grabbed King Yu's hand, both his eyes filling with tears, as he said every word softly, "Yue, it will be hard on you," after which, his gaze froze and old tears fell as he died, filled with regret. Yes, it was indeed hard on her. She had to simultaneously shoulder a widow's pain and the calamity of a doomed nation. If it was any other regular girl, this task would be impossible. But she was capable of doing so, and after ascending to the throne, she never shed a single tear again as her disposition underwent a huge change. Or it was more apt to say that in the face of this calamity, she had no choice but to change. All that she had experienced and endured as empress over the last 1.5 years was even more than what King Wanhe had endured over his decades of rule. And her present might and disposition of a ruler was not any less than King Wanhe at the outset of his rule. Her every word and action was filled with imperial power. Dongfang Xiu was not sure if he should rejoice or if his heart should grieve. "General Feng, you will immediately lead all the cavalry under my command towards the south. At the same time, send a sound transmission to Great Desert Lord Gung Wanli and advise him to give up on the northern and the western front. Then, immediately set out towards the south. March through the day and night if you have to, but you must meet at the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range, which is to the north of New Moon City. After which you will conceal yourselves on both sides of the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range, and once the Divine Phoenix army arrives, you will ambush them from the left and right. Always bear this in mind. The deeper you journey into the 10,000 Beasts Mountain Range, the fiercer the profound beasts will be. Therefore, conceal yourselves on its periphery if you can and never attempt to delve deeper." When she mentioned the 10,000 Beasts Mountain Range, King Yu's heart began to tremble. Because it was after they had gone through that period of joy and sorrow together in the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range all those years ago that their hearts had become one. "This general has received your command." An awe-inspiring general who was radiating martial power and in full armor gave a salute. After which, he raised his head to ask, "Your Majesty, if Gung Wanli travels south, he will pass by the Heavenly Sword Mountain Range. Should he once again ask Heavenly Sword Villa for help?" Empress King Yu's slender eyebrows twitched, and her gaze fell in the direction of Heavenly Sword Villa. She spoke in a voice as cold as ice. 1,000 years ago, my Blue Wind ancestor and the ancestor of the Heavenly Sword Villa were sworn brothers for life. Both parties mutually supported one another, with one having all political authority while the other had all the power. They swore a blood oath with each other, that they would live and die as one, and if one party was facing imminent doom, the other would definitely pour out all his power to help. In the past, when our Blue Wind imperial family was in a state of upheaval and my royal father was poisoned by scoundrels, for them to not extend any help at all was already tantamount to being unvirtuous and unjust. However, at that time, the imperial family was not truly facing destruction, so they could still be forgiven. But at this present time, on the occasion of our demise, 2 years ago, when we sought help from them a total of 9 times, even to the point where we grovelled and begged, they shut themselves in their villa, ignoring us completely. Since they are empty of righteousness, why should we shame ourselves any further? General Feng slowly nodded his head. "I understand, I will set off immediately." "Wait." Empress King Yu turned around and said, "Even though we have broken off all relations with them, we should still pay Heavenly Sword Villa a visit." As Empress King Yu's voice fell, her hands unraveled a sheet of dull golden silk. She gathered profound energy in her finger and wrote the following words swiftly. "Your faithlessness hath earned mine contempt, your disregard hath aroused mine spite, this Empress shall always remember this. If the Blue Wind doth see the dawn and its gentle breeze chances upon the Heavenly Sword, there will be no reconciliation, for only hate and enmity remains, forevermore. Empress Kenyu did not hide anything while she was writing, and those close to her could all that was written. After she finished writing, she folded the silk and passed it to General Feng. Dispatch men to Heavenly Sword Villa. You do not need to see anyone, just throw this thing at the foot of the Heavenly Sword mountain range. No matter if Blue Wind lives or dies, what I have said today will never be taken back. After gazing upon the delicate characters which were saturated with majestic power, General Feng nodded his head heavily, kept the silk sheet carefully, and quickly withdrew. Empress Kenyu saw him off and turned around after, gazing into the distance, her thoughts hidden from all who were present. I am a daughter of Blue Wind, wife of Yunche. Even in death, I will never defile their glorious names. Primordial Profound Arc. Yunche sat cross-legged in front of the stone door and stared intensely at that large hole on the stone door. Through this large hole, he could already clearly see the scenery outside. This was the result of his consecutive fusions of ice flames for half a year. After a total of more than 600 destructive strikes from the ice flame, the hole on the stone door had expanded to a size even larger than an adult's head. However, after trying several times, it was still insufficient for him to leave this place. It was still lacking that small bit. The frozen end and phoenix flames in Yunche's hands once again successfully fused together. Compared to the first few attempts, the time he took to fuse them this time was very short, and even the process itself was a little casually done. In half a year, from repeating more than 600 times without rest, when he fused ice and flames, it was no longer as difficult as before. Speaking from another perspective, his understanding towards this heaven-bending law had gradually become more thorough during this process. This time, it will definitely succeed, Yunche muttered, as he struck the ice flame in his hand towards the side of that hole. The destruction of the ice flame was completely soundless, and as the demonic ice-blue-colored flames dissipated, it could be seen with the naked eyes that the width of the hole had stretched by a small degree. After visually measuring the current width of the hole, Yunche took a deep breath. Just as he was about to stand, suddenly, the profound energy in his profound veins stirred for a moment. This is another breakthrough. Yunche hurriedly stabilized his body in a sitting posture, focused his mind, and slowly guided the profound energy in his body. Every fusion of a single ice flame consumed an enormous amount of profound energy. Hence, with every successful fusion, it was a form of refinement to his profound strength to a very large degree. On the 140th fusion, his profound energy broke through into the 9th level of the Sky Profound Realm. It had only been 4 months since then, and his profound level was once again confronted with a breakthrough. Just like the one before, the breakthrough this time was, a matter of course, incomparably successful. In less than 8 minutes, the profound energy in his profound veins had completely calmed down, and the aura being emitted from Yunche's body had undergone an evident change. The profound energy of the Earth Profound Realm was like a mist, while the profound energy of the Sky Profound Realm was as dense as a white syrup. Now that he had crossed into the peak of the Sky Profound Realm, the profound energy within his profound veins was so dense it was as though they were about to solidify. Scarlet-colored and blue-colored light intersected each other with their glows, causing the entire space of profound veins to look as though it was a dreamlike world. Yunche opened his eyes, looked at his own pair of hands, and muttered to himself. It seems like I'm not really far off from the Emperor Profound Realm as well. Give me another year or less, and I will definitely accomplish in becoming a throne. Yunche stood up. His eyes stared intensely at the large hole on the stone door, before he stuffed his head into it. Just like before, his head effortlessly crossed through. However, his shoulders were still stuck at inner rim, and were unable to pass through. Yunche stretched out his neck, straightened his body, and struggled to fold his arms. Then, leaping with his legs, he greatly exerted his strength. In an instant, with a boink sound, his shoulders which had been stuck inside, instantly snapped into the hole. Success! Although the snap was very painful, Yunche revealed a joyful look. He strongly moved his body, pulled along both of his arms, allowing his own upper body to move forward within the hole, little by little, to the point where he was struggling while grimacing in pain, and his face and neck had turned red. If not because there wasn't anyone in the Primordial Profound Arc, even if Yunche had to wait for another half a month, he definitely wouldn't be willing to act like this, which would ruin his image in front of others. I simply don't believe that I'm not able to get out. Yunche struggled for a good long while, before his arms had finally struggled out a half of the door. He widened his eyes, took a deep breath, and exerted his strength with all his might. With a sweep sound, the clothes Yunche was wearing were completely torn apart, while, like an unleashed cannonball, his entire body was suddenly shot out from the hole. Then, his head smashed head-on with the wall at the front not far away. Yunche stood up while holding onto his head. Turning his head around, he saw the stone door that was embedded with a large hole. And that stone door was actually more than 30 meters away from his current location. I'm out. I'm finally out. Even though his head was in severe pain from the crash, Yunche was still celebrating to himself with incomparable excitement. From back then, when he thought that he was in a situation of absolute death, to surviving in incomparably sufferable conditions, he had now just escaped from the place where he was trapped in for 2 whole years. It would be hard for him to not feel excited at all. Don't be happy too soon. Jasmine's voice resounded coldly. You have only left a small stone room. You're currently still in the primordial profound arc. Do you know how to leave this primordial profound arc? Jasmine's words caused Yunche's emotions to speedily cool down. He pondered for a moment, before replying. No matter how big this profound arc is, it should still have edges. As long as I find the edges, and use the ice flame like I did to break open the stone door, little by little, I will definitely be able to get out. HMPH, you're really naive. Jasmine snorted coldly. You used exactly half a year to break open a small stone door. The thickness of the walls at the corner of the primordial profound arc is at least 10,000 times more than the stone door, and their tenacity far surpasses a mere absolutely ordinary stone door in the interior. What are you going to use to break them open? This? I know it's not really realistic either. However, if I want to leave this place, it's not like this is the only way. Yunche continued. The primordial profound arc will appear in the profound sky continent once every 300 years. Every time, those who enter will always be expelled by the primordial profound arc's aura. Yunche pondered as he said with a heavy expression. According to past records, usually, the primordial profound arc will stop for half a year, then, the arc gate will open on the very last day, and everyone who have entered the profound arc will be expelled at the final moment. And counting the time the primordial profound arc had suddenly halted previously, it's been about half a year since then as well. That aura might arrive any time soon. As long as I leave this fortress, and wait for the arrival of that aura, I will be able to leave. What you have said might indeed become reality. Jasmine lightly said. Then, do you know what place the primordial profound arc has currently stopped at? Since you know that the primordial profound arc will only appear once in the profound sky continent every 300 years, then, the place it has currently stopped at, is naturally impossible for it to be the profound sky continent as well. If you leave due to the aura, then, you will be brought into some unknown place. In the profound sky continent, there seems to be no records on other similar spaces where the primordial profound arc has appeared in. In other words, the place where you will be brought to is extremely possible to be completely unrelated to the profound sky continent. The distance between two might be extremely far, and it might be a place where you will be unable to once again return to the profound sky continent forever. Yunche's body suddenly stiffened. Very evidently, this primordial profound arc does not merely stop in the profound sky continent. It seems to be undergoing spatial transference abiding by a certain pattern. At every fixed period of time, it will stop at a fixed place, and stays for a fixed period of time as well, with 300 years as a complete cycle. Jasmine slowly said. In the boundless universe and chaotic space, there's countless galaxies, countless astral planes, and countless dimensions. The blue pole star where you reside in before, is merely one of the most normal and inconspicuous among them. The primordial profound arc has undergone exactly 18 months of spatial transference. With this amount of time, it's sufficient for it to reach a faraway place that you are unable to imagine or understand. So far away that even if you succeed in stepping into the divine profound realm, and spend your entire life, it will still be impossible for you to return to the profound sky continent. Could it be that I have to wait here for 300 years, until it once again returns to profound sky continent, before I choose to be expelled by the aura? Yunche was silent for a long while, before he said, startled. In actuality, in the recent few months, he had thought about what Jasmine had just said. However, it was hard for him to accept this reality. If he were to leave the primordial profound arc now, he would appear in another completely different world. It might be impossible for him to return to profound sky continent as well. However, if he were to wait here for more than 300 years. 300 years. Given his dragon god's physique and the protection from the great way of the Buddha, even if he did not have profound energy, living another 300 years wasn't a problem at all, to the point where he would not have any hint of having aged either. However, combining his two lives together, he had only lived for less than 50 years. Just how was he supposed to face such a long span of time of 300 years? Just what would happen to profound sky continent after 300 years? 300 years later, the people he were concerned about. Grandfather, little aunt, Keng Yu, Yuanba, Qin Yu. Would they still be around? If they would they still remember him then? If they would remember, then how would he face that situation? Jasmine sensed that Yunche's state of mind and aura had become a little messy. She lightly voiced out. Forget it, there's no need for you to be so pessimistic. Give me another few more years, when the deadly poison is completely cleansed from my body, when you have helped me accomplish all 4 conditions that I require, allowing my body to be reconstructed. No matter what place you're in, I will still be able to bring you straight back to profound sky continent. The 4 conditions Jasmine set for Yunche were, enter the sovereign profound realm in 30 years, 3 tyrant profound beasts profound pellets, 35 kilograms of purple veined divine crystals, and a netherworld Udambara flower. These items can be gathered not just from the profound sky continent. And in reality, it's seemingly impossible to find them in the profound sky continent as well, especially when it comes to 35 kilograms of purple veined divine crystal. HMPH, even when all of the purple veined divine crystals of the profound sky continent are pooled together, it still wouldn't be enough to make up 35 kilograms. You can simply use the aura of this profound arc to bring you into the world it has currently stopped in. In this world, it might be easier to find the items I require. Jasmine's words had instantly dispersed the clouds in Yunche's heart, and his eyes once again shone. In regards to Jasmine's ability to bring him back to the profound sky continent after Jasmine had remodeled her body, Yunche did not suspect it in the slightest. Because Jasmine was initially someone who had come from a place other than the profound sky continent, and it wasn't just its distance being extremely far and long, even their levels were extremely far away from their own world. Great! Yunche slowly nodded, as he temporarily placed down the reluctance in his heart. If it really only stops at every place for exactly half a year, then it should be about time. Now, I shall hurry out of the fortress, and wait for the aura to expel me. Hopefully, it doesn't send me to a dead world. As he said that, Yunche no longer hesitated. His body flew, and he hurriedly looked for the staircase down. From the top of the stone stairs, he directly leapt down, and landed on that circle-shaped stone stage on the first floor of this mysterious fortress. Just as he was about to lift up his leg to fly again, a voice suddenly resounded in his ears. Please, find her. Yunche halted his footsteps. Ever since the first day he had stepped into the primordial profound arc, and after he spent half a year to break open the stone door, he had heard this voice several times. Basically, every 4 to 6 hours, it would voice out again. However, this time, it was different from every single one before. Back then, the voice he heard was frail and insignificant. If he did not focus his mind, it would be a little hard to hear, as it seemed to have come from an extremely far place. While this time, it was so close, as if it was right next to his ear. Episode 81 is end here. Next episode coming tomorrow. Thanks for watching.